coming live from the 215, so get it right. 500 homicides, we ducking shots through the night. So if you gon' shoot, make sure you hit your shot, boy. You better look alive when you hit that block, boy. That's it. Yeah, I'm done with the game.
What's up, fam? Welcome back to the Time is Ripe podcast. My name is Scott Smith, and I am your host here on the Time is Ripe. This is a podcast of Ripe Creatives, which is a ministry based in the great city of Philadelphia. We leverage the arts for the purpose of missions. A lot of times we're talking about events that we host here in the city of Philadelphia. Every once in a while, we're talking about events where we got booked to go do some stuff in another place. Today is one of those episodes where we're talking about the latter. We're talking about going to something else and being a part of it. Specifically, we're talking about the Refresh Conference hosted by an organization called InFaith. This happened in April of 2024. The dates were April 22nd through the 25th. It was at Camp Mount Herman, which is near San Francisco, California, very far away from Philadelphia. It's certainly not our event, but something that was hosted by our friends at InFaith. I actually got to be a part of this conference. And so while the episode will talk a lot about those 3-4 days in California, there's like a whole 12-year history here that leads up to this story even happening. And that is the relationship with one of the guests today. So can't wait to have these conversations with her as we introduce her. First, I want to introduce the returning guest. He's on this episode. We have no idea how much of this conversation he's going to be involved in, but hey.
We'll see how much I talk today.
But Jarrett Top Mom Moses is back. He's the producer of this amazing podcast, Time is Ripe, and he's on the majority of these episodes. So he's here because he has some overlapping relationship with our guest host,
yes,
as well. So we're excited to flesh this thing out and talk about April. But as I said, there's going to be a lot of story before then. Our other guest, our third and final guest, it is her first time here on the podcast. She has never been here before. We pray it's not her last because we love her so much. I affectionately have her in my phone as Megs. I met her when she was Megs Thompson, but she has long been Megs DeHaven. Megs DeHaven, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this and looking forward to our conversation.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. That was like the most professional, introductory statement on this podcast.
One of the cleanest intros we've ever had.
Listen, Megs has been on a podcast before. She has been here and done this. I feel like she's a pro. She's on the wrong podcast to be a pro. But Megs, thank you for being here. So you're a first timer. Mm-hmm. Something we have all of our guests do that have never been on before is like introduce yourself as if these people have no idea who you are. Okay. We know a lot of the listeners today or whenever you're listening to this probably do know you because they found out about this through you. But a lot are people who partner with Ripe Creatives. They probably never heard your name before. So I would love for you to as if they don't know who you are. Who are you? Okay. Megs DeHaven.
Well, I'm Meg DeHaven, like you mentioned. I'm married to Mike DeHaven. We have 3 kids, Nora, Max, and Ford. My husband and I served in youth and family ministries in a local church for about 14 years. And most recently, we stepped into positions with, like you said, an organization called InFaith. InFaith is actually the nation's oldest domestic missions organization. We just celebrated our 207th birthday. And so I serve as the director of mobilization there. And I am just so excited about the ways that God is leading our family into missions and partnering with people like yourself and partnering with people all over the country doing missions work. So that's who I am.
Yeah, it's a pretty good intro. So to put this in context for a lot of our listeners, sure. They hear us talk about Artists in Christian Testimony International, yep. ACT International. We don't talk about it on every episode, but we've explained it many, many times. Even on the previous podcast, Coming at Ripe, we talked about ACT stuff quite a bit over there. InFaith and ACT are very similar in terms of what they do in terms of mobilizing missionaries. The way Ripe Creatives is under ACT International, it could have been under InFaith, just the same.
Correct.
They mobilize missionaries. ACT has a pretty big bend and focus on the arts, though, whereas InFaith, I think, has more of a focus on like church planners and chaplains and camp directors, is at least what I've seen.
Yeah, we have like a really broad spectrum, so we don't necessarily have a niche direction with our missionaries. But I'd say a lot of them are very entrepreneurial in nature. So we have horse camps, people working with kids with special needs, working with the elderly. So it does cover a wide spectrum.
Very cool. So you've been with InFaith how long now?
2 years.
2 years. Okay. So the whole time you've been there, we've been doing stuff together.
Yes.
Let's tell the story. Cause as we said, this was, April of 2024 is what we're going to like center on. But I really think maybe only 30% of this episode is actually going to talk about our time in California, because there's just so much more fun stuff to talk about before then. I would love to, from your perspective, tell the story of how we met 2011.
Yep.
That's a long time ago.
It was a very long time ago. So I was about 2 years into a youth ministry role in the local area, and our church, we were taking our youth group to the Philadelphia Project that summer for a missions trip, a short-term missions project. And you, Scott, were assigned as as one of the interns. I believe there were 2 assigned to our group. And looking back, I will say we were blessed to have you assigned to our group. And so that was the start of what has become an incredible relationship in my mind. But that was a week full of firsts, I think, for all of us. And I primarily remember you and I, Scott, sitting at night after club, looking through YouTube on how to build a back porch, because that was one of the projects that we were assigned to do. And I remember thinking, this is actually going to turn out okay, because I had confidence in the questions you were able to put into YouTube and actually find videos that were teaching us how to do this thing. And you had so much confidence, and we just went for it. I don't know if that porch is still standing.
It's still standing, yes.
See?
It's still standing.
He drives by regularly. He makes sure.
It's 300 yards from here.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh.
This was 2011. I was a college student serving as an intern at TPP, and Ray was in over his head. I love you, Ray.
Oh, wait, you were the intern?
Yeah.
I was the intern.
So this is all your fault.
I know. It was
We
incredible.
spent a week together, and it was one of the best weeks imaginable. We had so much fun, but I'm not kidding when I tell you I would pull Meg and the other Meg and Chuck, and we'd pull all these people over into like this like leader circle, and I'd say, hey, listen, none of us actually know what we're doing, right? But we're going to have a blast today. And we're going to convince these children that we know what we're talking about, and we are going to build this thing. And if we do it wrong, like, somebody's going to have to come fix it, but we're going to do our best. And we did that for 5 days, and it was a blast. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like, there, under no circumstance should I be in charge of a construction project ever. But I was for an entire summer.
For a whole summer.
But for that week, I mean, that week was just a blast. We had so much fun, though.
It was.
Like the memories that were made. And I this is such a nuanced detail, but there's a video of this week, and I don't even know if you know that this happened, Meg, but it's in the video. This is how comical this season of life was. So Chuck's wife is holding a level, right, up against a piece of wood. And then she turns and she lets go of the piece of wood, so the level is just no longer relevant. And then just like comes back and screws it in. And I was like, it was in the video, like in the actual video showing like the before and after of what we did is this moment where like you're using a level to make sure it's level, and then you let go of the board so it's not level anymore and you screw it in. And I was like, oh my gosh.
I think that's a good summary of what that
was a summary of our experience that week. So
it was wild.
Summer missions, man. What a thing. So yeah, that was how we met. Summer of 2011. And then I ended up coming came back on staff full time with Philly Project for a long, long time. I was there for almost a decade. And throughout that time, you came back a bunch of times. So it was me in a different capacity.
Yep.
You still in the same as the youth director at that church.
Yep.
And different students, year over year. But you guys came back a bunch of times. So we got to have a ton of interactions around that. And early on in my tenure at TPP, I learned about Breakaway Youth Retreat.
Yep.
And that is you could share a little bit about that.
Sure. Breakaway is a middle school retreat that's been going on for probably about 25 years. I actually attended as a 6th grade middle school student.
You didn't start it?
No, I did not start it. No, I went as a student one of the first years it was ever run. A kid at school invited me on a Friday, and that afternoon I got on a bus and went to this retreat. It was incredible. I loved it. And then when I stepped into youth ministry after I graduated college, it was still in existence. And so I took the kids in our youth group. That year, one church the church who had started it passed it off to another church. That youth director invited me to be a part of the leadership team. And after a year, he said, I think this is your skill set. So would you mind taking this on? And so with the blessing of my home church, we took it on, and I've been running it for the last 15 years now.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It is at its peak before COVID. It was like 600-700 kids over the course of a couple different weekends.
Yep.
All 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Correct.
Like a specific demographic, that many kids. I mean, that is such a broad reach church to church. And it wasn't just let's get all the big churches together. It was very intentional to draw churches that wouldn't be able to do this without Breakaway existing, which I always appreciated. And it's just so our listeners, Breakaway Middle School Retreat is not the Breakaway Conference that we talk about in the March of every year, because we do a conference called Breakaway that is totally separate from this. This is in September, October every year. And so I remember early on in my tenure at TPP, 2012, 2013, 2014, I was at Breakaway, typically running the games for club, like the club experiences or, the evening programming, being an MC, wearing costumes. Me and my good friend Kip Zimmerman. He was Captain Canada.
Yes.
He turned a Captain America costume with a maple leaf on the shield. Oof. And he had superpowers with syrup.
That's right.
It was a great time. I think I was Rat Man or something instead of Batman.
You were Rat Man.
Yeah, Rat Man.
That was 1 year.
Yeah, 1 year. 1 year. I didn't live very long, but whatever.
We gave it a try.
Maybe
Matt
not
Wilcox.
A bad thing.
I think I inherited that role. I did not design that role or write that role. That was Matt Wilcox.
Yep. That was his favorite role he's ever played.
Listen, it's the only role I've ever played. But yeah, just being the MC at Breakaway. 1 year you actually asked me to speak.
Yes.
Over the course of a 2-weekender thing at the peak of its powers.
Yeah.
I did so bad that the pandemic came and killed it. Just kidding.
Not true.
But had a blast doing that. Very thankful for that opportunity. I was very young to be given that kind of opportunity. I think I was pretty unique for you to have somebody as young as I was doing that. So really appreciate that. But then I would go back and I would, serve in whatever way. I served on the kitchen crew a couple times. I helped run errands for you guys a couple times. Yep. Just tried to be an asset, however I could. And then as I got connected into Ripe stuff, even when we launched Ripe, we started talking about the relationship between Breakaway and Ripe, establishing even more kind of a connectivity there. But even before we get into Ripe Breakaway connectivity, I remember you were hey, can you come in and do a youth group takeover with Ripe?
Yes.
Our kids love the artist. They love Abel. They love Rick. We had just added, I think, Rashid around that time. And so it was hey, summer 2021, still 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But you were hey, can you let's figure out a thing. Jarrett actually came that night.
I remember going that night. That was one of the first times I stepped out and did anything with Ripe in the city that wasn't creatives.
Yes. Wow. That was one of Jarrett's first gigs with us. Hey, there's not a whole budget for this, but can you come out and serve?
Yeah.
And just make sure that this night goes better than if you weren't here. Because a lot of times it's very easy to just overlook it. Like a youth group is like, hey, you guys have artists, you'll just come in and it'll be great. And it's like, if you don't actually know how to run sound, it's not going to be great. Like, it's actually going to be pretty bad. Because, you know, everything that an artist wants to communicate through a microphone has to sound good for it to connect with students. And so it was kind of like a safeguard, like, hey, Jarrett, do you think you could do this? Because I think if you're there, this will be better than if Mike's trying to run sound, or somebody else is trying to run sound, a student. Or something, where they just know how to turn on a fader, you know, turn the button on and push a fader up.
All the way up.
So many things happened that night that I'm just remembering. Oh my gosh.
There's
probably
a lot.
That shouldn't be on.
But Abel and Rick killed it. I think I did spoken word.
Yes.
And I think Rashid performed. And that was a beautiful, like, kind of growth moment for him. And then our friends Joy and Peace Sight came. And in classic Ripe fashion,
Peace actually jumped on the drum kit in the middle of like Abel and Rick's set.
Yes. Like, that's what we always do. We're just very collaborative.
Kids went nuts for it.
It was awesome.
And like, that's who we are. Like, if our friends are there that know how to play an instrument or know how to do a thing, like, we're always looking for ways to collaborate and work together. And I actually had a video for a long time of Joy singing for the kids outside
that
in the
night
parking
after.
lot. That's why I thought she performed at the event, but she actually performed in the parking lot for the kids on ukulele. And we love Joy Ike. She made our website, ripcreatives.com. If you go see it, our new website was made by Joy. So just like very small world connectivity relationship thing. I think if you've listened to any of the first 40 some odd episodes of this podcast, you've heard us talk about friendship, relationship, opening the door for opportunities, even more so than talent.
Only a couple times. I don't know. We haven't talked about that much at all. No.
That's sarcasm. It's on almost every episode. Because I think that's been our story is Ripe, is like friends open doors for us. And then I think we've been, by the grace of God, good stewards of those opportunities to stay in the doors that have been open to us. So, Ripe show, you know, summer 2021. And then you bring Breakaway back post-pandemic. And you guys had a big shift with Breakaway on the worship front in particular.
Our first year back, we had to change all of the dynamics. We actually had to move club outdoors. We had no idea who was even coming. And so we just had to kind of bend over backwards to really not spend any money because we didn't know what money would be coming in. So Breakaway, really every year, we just exist to serve the churches. So I try and keep costs down to like the absolute minimum. Like, I'm adding pennies together at the end to make sure that we can pay whoever comes. And so that first year back, we had a youth leader on a guitar who did a fabulous job, but we really scaled all the way back. But the blessing of that year was that nearly every church returned. So after that first year back, we realized the Breakaway was back, that this was God's leading, that he was creating space for us to continue with the ministry of Breakaway, which then the second year is when we said, okay, let's really, let's figure out this dynamic and what it's going to be and how can we really serve these kids. And that's when I contacted you to see how Ripe could partner.
And what you kind of said, like pitched to me was like, what if Ripe takes over like Breakaway from a programmatic standpoint? Like in a theory. And I think we were even like dreaming of what that could look like very eventually, as there's like, you know, better understanding of what that could actually entail. But it was like, let's at minimum start with Ripe Worship, right? With Emily Phillips and, you know, the Ripe Worship team. Like, let's find a way to bring them in to be the worship team. And I think that first year you actually booked Ant to be the DJ. And you booked Jarrett to run sound.
I was not there the
no,
first year.
No, he wasn't. It was just Ant by himself.
Just Ant by himself.
So
and Ant was like, bro, come on.
It was a lot.
Like, what are we doing? So Jarrett wasn't there that year, but then that was a shift for the following. But that first year, Ant was a DJ, and then we brought Abel in to perform. I think we brought somebody else in to perform. Maybe Drew Smith came that year.
Maybe.
And then you had booked me to be the speaker. And I was like, love you. I don't love doing this, but God has a way of chasing me down and making me do these things. But I am of the philosophy where like every opportunity that comes my way, I really do try to give it away first. That's just kind of the way that I've been wired. Is God, is this at least asking the Lord the question, is this for me or is this for somebody else?
Sure.
And you were like, Scott, we really want you to be the speaker, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I really don't want to be the speaker, but if you can't find anybody else, like, I got you, because you were trying to bring this thing back. And Ripe Worship is going to be there. So they're like, hey, come on, we're booking your worship team. And I was like, okay. So, but I didn't really want to do it.
Yep.
Probably a couple weeks later, I'm at an event with Ripe Worship, and Rob Chifakoyo is speaking at it. And Rob is phenomenal. He's an amazing speaker preacher, especially to teenagers and like middle school, maybe even like as well, really specifically.
Yes.
So gifted with that demographic. He's like an author. He's written some books and stuff. Like he's working on books, and he preaches, you know, in the area. Like amazing dude, thick African accent, hysterical, great storyteller. Like he's phenomenal.
Yes.
And I remember seeing him, and I had already heard about him from Ripe Worship from a different thing, that they were like, oh, this guy's amazing. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to ask like what he's up to in September to see if he wants to be the speaker at this thing I just got booked for, because I don't really want to do it. Like I want to do Breakaway, but I don't want to be speaker. So I go up to Rob and I just asked the question. I said, hey, do you want to do this more often? Like speak to teenagers.
Right.
And his wife, adorable, like comes out of the woodwork. She like overheard, like eavesdrops on this conversation. She goes, yes, he does. And it was like the most adorable, like wife thing where I was just like, yo, that's like, she's your ride or die, like looking out for you. And he like laughed and was like, yeah, I do. I just don't really know how to get these opportunities. Like, I love this stuff. I feel like it's my calling, my passion, but you know, I'm not getting like the calls all the time to do this stuff. And I was like, well, I have an opportunity for you if you'd like to do it, because I got booked for this thing. I don't really want to do it. So why don't you do it? And I'll just host an MC. Yep. And he was like, well, let me look at my calendar. This sounds amazing. Then he comes back. He's like, well, I can't do it because I can't do Sunday morning.
Right.
And I was like, Rob, do Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday night. I got you Sunday morning. It'll be fine. So then I did all this. And then I went to Meg and I was like, hey, just so you know, Rob Chifakoyo is going to be your speaker at Breakaway. Yeah.
And just to give a little bit of context, Scott actually called me like, I think it was like 10:30 at night.
Scott fashion.
And I was like, something must be wrong. So I hesitantly answered it, knowing that Breakaway was actually only, I think, maybe 3 or 4 weeks away. We were actually super close.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was close.
Amen.
What are you doing?
Listening to the Lord. That's what I was doing.
And that's what Scott said. He said, Meg, he said, I have to tell you, like, I really believe this is of God. That's how he prefaced the conversation, to which my heart sank and then also came right back up, because I've known Scott for 10 years, I've never seen you waver in answering the call of the Lord when he's speaking to you. And I have seen it up front and in person, and I've heard it from afar. And so I knew immediately that if God was moving in this way, I could trust you. And so when you said it had to be Rob, as much as my flesh didn't want that to be true, only because I was like, no, Scott, I asked you, I picked you, this is it. I knew I could trust you. So I, without hesitation, after that phone call, then called Rob and was like, hey, here you're the guy. And it was incredible. And you were absolutely right. You were right.
He's absolutely amazing.
It was
like,
it was
bar
awesome.
none, the perfect fit.
Yeah.
And it was cool because like I ended up doing Sunday morning anyway. Right?
We got a little bit of you.
Yeah, I did.
But you were there the whole time.
But I did the whole week. And that's
did.
why I said to Rob, I was like, whatever they're going to pay me to be the speaker, they'll just pay you. I will go serve for the weekend. I'll be there for the weekend. I will hang out. I will do the MC role stuff. Right. I love doing that stuff anyway. I love playing games with the kids. But you do the heavy lifting and the spiritual warfare of like prepping all these messages. Yep. And then I'll pick up Sunday morning and give them the charge and take everything that you've done, which is also like what I'm good at.
Yes.
Curating content based upon what I'm hearing in a room. So I got to write a message during the weekend based upon what he had already said.
Right.
And I think it was like put a nice bow on the weekend and a charge to the students. But all weekend, everybody was like, man, this speaker guy,
He was incredible.
how'd you find him? And I was like, she did it. I didn't say that.
But you could have, and it would have been true.
No, but it was just like, it was so good. And me and him just became like very fast kindred spirits too.
Yeah.
Like even because I think the beginning of our relationship was one of like offering
Yes.
space to each other, right? Hey, like, yo, you're amazing at this, blah, blah, blah. That kind of like solidified us very quickly.
Yep.
And I think he knew that I really had his best intention in mind.
Right.
So there just was like very fast trust established. Now, fast forward, that weekend goes amazing well.
Yep.
You are at InFaith
Yep.
and you're like dreaming about something for the Refresh conference.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
So every year we have this conference for all of our missionaries. So we have over 160 missionaries and 70 chaplains serving all over the U.S. And every year InFaith invites them all to come for a conference. And the model that I inherited was that it was for the missionary and they were welcome to invite their spouse. But it was specifically just for the individual or the couple, no kids allowed. And there was some, I think, good intention behind that. And I think it ran well for the season that ran. But obviously because of my background in youth and family ministry, I saw an opportunity really to invest in the lives of these missionary kids, these chaplain kids, kids who I think oftentimes, at least in church culture, we assume they kind of know everything because they're the ones that are a part of Sunday mornings, summer camps, all of these ministry opportunities. Like, how much more do they really need? But as I get to know more missionary kids and chaplain kids, I think sometimes they get left behind and we make grand assumptions on their behalf. And they deserve the gospel as much as the unchurched kid does. And sometimes I think we bypass them with either the words of the gospel or at least the truth of the gospel and living it out alongside of them. So in recognizing that, I went to our CEO and I said, hey, Jerry, can we bring kids and families this year? And he was like, go for it. So I quickly had to figure out, how do I run a kids and youth program while also still running the same level of adult programming that had been offered in the past? And in true form, I immediately was like, Scott Smith can help me do this. And I just do. I
Classic
trust
Meg.
Scott wholeheartedly. And like I said about the decision with Rob, like, I just trust that you are following God's leading. And because of that, I can trust the decisions you and your wife make together. And it's just incredible. So I called Scott before I broadcasted it to everyone. I called Scott to say, hey, would you be available to come and help lead the youth portion of this?
Right.
And then I said, what if I got Rob and Rob's wife, Lisa, who I discovered at the Breakaway weekend, she does children's ministry.
Yes.
So it became a team thing real quickly.
I said, I would be happy to come help if you get Rob to speak.
Yes. You're right.
And you were like, that's so funny because I'm already thinking like that's who I'd want to be like the speaker.
Exactly.
But then I guess you talked to Rob and it was like kind of this like, haha, look at God, because he said, I'll speak, but I don't want to run.
I don't want to run
all the
anything
activities.
Else. I just want to speak.
I can't do that. I
Yes.
don't know how people do that. I can't do that. That's not me.
Yep.
And then you were like, well, what if we got Scott? And Rob's like, if you get Scott, I'll go. And I'm like, if you get Rob, I'll go.
And I was like, perfect. Everyone's coming.
So we all get to do this week together. It was in San Antonio, Texas last year.
Right.
It was fantastic. Such a good time. And the kids were freaking amazing and adorable. And Rob did great. And we had fun. And I sprained my ankle playing basketball because I'm an old, because I'm an old man. But it was a great time and like such a blessing. And for me, it is like, it's such a burden-less joy to facilitate activities with kids. Is still go really deep with them conversationally and discipleship-wise without having to prep 5 messages, right? Because that is like people who really feel called to that. Mm-hmm. Like if I did that every week, I'd be okay.
Yeah.
It's not the regular thing that I do. I host events and I perform spoken word and I manage artists and I invest in relational discipleship.
Right.
Like that's what I do. I don't preach week in and week out.
Yeah.
So I feel like out of practice, and the pandemic shut down most of my speaking engagements. So I've been really out of practice. I used to do it every week. I don't do it as much, at least leading up to San Antonio. So I was kind of like, you know what? I don't really want to do this, but if Rob's in, I'll go and I'll do the other stuff. So it became a match made in heaven. Fast forward a year, we do Breakaway again.
Yes.
Jarrett's there running sound. You guys get connected over the course of a weekend that weekend.
Right.
That was a fun weekend. I had a lot of fun. I also enjoyed it because I just got to stay at my parents' house because I grew up like 5 minutes from the camp.
Forgot about that. Yes, I know. And the thing that was so awesome for me, and again, it goes back to my trust with Scott, is, you know, when Scott got me connected with kind of the whole Right Worship team, I knew I could trust you guys to do the things you were gifted and experienced and skilled at doing, because I have zero skill set or intuition when it comes to those things. And so this relationship has been such an ongoing gift to me, because it's just grown the potential of places I'm able to serve and ministry I'm able to do, because I'm able to rely on you guys to do the things that God's gifted you to do. And I know that you'll show up to do it. And so when he, especially after the first year, when we were like, we really need to add more people to this because it could be that much better. And then Jarrett, when you showed up, I can't tell you even just the relief I felt to know that I had someone I could trust in that spot. Because to your point earlier, like, when things sound right, it's less distracting to the kids. Like, more ministry is actually done, I think, like when the sound levels are correct in a room of middle schoolers. Like they need that. And it's just that valuable. And so I was just so blessed to be a part of a ministry team. And in some ways, as much as Ripe came to serve Breakaway, I've been blessed to feel like I'm partnering with Ripe in those ministry opportunities, and to really feel like I become a part of that team. And I think you guys have just done a great job at inviting people into your space as much as you get invited in other spaces. It was cool.
We have a really good, solid team. And I think what's cool is it's not always the same. Even the worship team, it's like, who's available? Yeah. There's 15 people in the team, only 6 are going to go, or 7 are going to go. And there might even be some tags, like, tag team championship wrestling, where like somebody's in the ring and then they can only do Friday night because they got a gig on Saturday, and then somebody's coming in on Saturday morning to switch. And that's like the beauty of it, like having a whole bunch of people in this community that are all gifted, multiple people who play drums, multiple people who play electric, multiple people who play keys, multiple singers.
Right.
You know, we can make sure there's a great team at every session, even if it's slightly different session to session.
For sure.
And then obviously adding Jarrett, like you said, was like just a really good win. And I like can't wait to dream eventually about like artists too, and like live painting and hip hop and singer songwriters. Like over the course of the weekend, how do we expand the Ripe takeover aspect of this as Breakaway gets more and more solid and flesh again post pandemic? So. But that year, the next year at Breakaway, you guys get connected, all that stuff happens. I was actually not at Breakaway the next year because it was the same weekend as Ignite.
Yes.
Which we did an episode about on this podcast in season 2. You can go back and check it out. But that leads into, okay, Ripe still, even if Scott wasn't there, that's okay. I still like Ripe. And the next year was InFaith for this California trip.
Yes.
And the dates, as we said at the beginning of this episode, 35 minutes ago, April 22nd through 25th. And again, the plan was, hey, if you get Rob, I'll go.
Yep.
If you get Scott, I'll go.
Yep.
And so me and Rob were going to tag team the Refresh Youth Conference for InFaith in California.
So then I got a call.
You got a call.
I got a call first.
And then I got a call.
And there was some hardship in Rob's family. His mother-in-law passed pretty suddenly. And so that required their family to do a lot of traveling. And so long story short, they were no longer able to come to partner with us doing Refresh this year. And so as sad and disappointed as I was, again, back to the trust that I have in Scott, I thought, I'll just call Scott, and I know he is capable of filling this role. Now my question is he willing? And so that was my phone call to Scott.
Oh, you should have heard the phone calls that I had with him about it.
First of all, what you just described is not what happened. Okay.
Well, that's how it happened in my mind.
What happened in your mind and what actually happened. What happened in your mind was that you were calling to see if I was willing to do it. Right?
Yes.
And I communicated that I don't want to do this, but I will be your last resort.
Yes.
If you can't find anybody else, you are not going to not have a youth program at Refresh. I got you.
Yep.
Right. But I would love for you to find somebody else.
Yes.
And I forget, you said something, and it was about 25 minutes into the conversation. I was like, Meg, are you telling me that this is what's happening, that I am the speaker? Or are you asking me if I'm willing to be the speaker? And you're like, oh, I'm telling you that you're going to be the speaker. And I was like, okay. So this isn't really do you want to do this or not? You're telling me what the plan is.
Pretty
Like,
much.
yeah, I'm telling you what the plan is. And I was like, awesome.
See, Scott, as much as you don't like to say this about yourself, you have been one of the most impactful ministry partners, also speakers that I've ever seen, heard, or worked with. And so to that end, I think I would have been doing the Refresh Youth Conference a disservice by not having you speak, because I had you like in the palm of my hand. And so to give you an out just felt like that was not the right direction.
Yeah, okay. What was that, sin?
No,
is that what that was?
No, I'm so serious. And
I appreciate the kind words, Meg.
I know, but it's true.
Praise God. All glory
and
to
you
him.
need to know that, because yes, you're right. I did maybe tell you rather than ask.
Yeah, you definitely did.
But
not
also,
maybe. There's no maybe.
I also
here.
was fully aware that you were the best person for that job.
The best person who was available on 2 weeks' notice.
Okay, fine. Whatever else you want to throw in there. But
Listen,
say,
you were talking about how you were booked for months. She was like, I'm just getting my backup in place.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey.
Listen, I was happy to go.
Yep. Well, thank you.
I did not love
didn't
the
back
idea.
out. Yep.
I did not back out.
Thank
I was
you.
not going to back out on you. I would never do that to you.
Well, I appreciate it.
But I did have to prep 5 talks pretty last minute.
Yep.
And I told Meg, I said, listen, they're going to be 5 okay talks. Like, they'll be all right, but they're not going to connect, because I'm pulling 5 out of the archives that I've done over the years. Like, I'm taking 5 good ones.
Yep.
And they're not going to make any sense connecting to each other, but they're going to be good. Individually, they're all going to stand on their own. And we ended up finding like a theme and ways to connect them and stuff. And it ended up working out, but was definitely not my favorite thing in the world. But so I was supposed to be the help to Rob.
Right.
Now I'm replacing Rob. You did something unique to kind of give me some help.
I tried my best.
Yeah, and so you gave me
3 interns.
3 munchkins.
Yeah, I had Matt, Sam, and Sarah. And they were all coming to the conference in order to help me out. So when this switchover happened, I made them dedicated to the youth program portion, so that you would have some support.
And there was a part of me that was going into it like, this may or may not be helpful.
Yes.
Meg,
yeah.
Because now I have to lead 3 people in the midst of like speaking and teaching to these teens. Now I have to like make sure that there's some buy-in with these young adults.
Right.
That are coming as interns. But it ended up being amazing. And I love all 3 of them. And they did a fantastic job.
One side story real quick. So one of them, Sarah, had been a student at the first Breakaway that Scott spoke at many years ago.
Hey.
And she gave her life to Christ that weekend. And fuller context, my mom had been praying for Sarah's family for over 7 years prior to that experience. And when she gave her life to Christ that weekend, she has never turned back and has continued to pursue Christ fully since then. And so then to have her come in April and serve alongside of you, Scott, the blessing that was to me to watch someone grow in their faith because of a seed that you were called to plant, and you were faithful to that calling. And God has used her in so many incredible ways in the ministry that I've been able to be a part of over the last decade. And to see that really come almost full circle, to see her serving in a capacity and leading other kids and investing and sharing Christ with them. if I died tomorrow, Scott, that to me was just such a gift. And I go back to, I know you're just a gifted speaker, but more so than that, you're faithful to Christ. And so because of that, seeds have been planted and things have happened and fruit has come of it. And that was one of them. And so that was a gift to me. And I pray it was a gift to you to even be able to see that, the impact that God has had through you. And it was awesome.
Yeah. It was majorly humbling.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is Scott needs to have more speaking opportunities for more of those.
Is that what that's what you're hearing? Right now?
What?
I would vote for that, but I also want to keep my friendship with Scott. So I'm going to let Jarrett go on the record for saying that. And I will be
Yeah, she's not going to call every other person she knows that runs events and say, hey, get Scott.
Sarah can be the speaker next year. She's ready. No, honestly, that whole situation, to be standing there in front of, 23-year-old girl,
yes.
I think.
Yep.
And to know that 10 years before,
yep,
when she was 13, she was in a room of, 300 middle schoolers responding to an invitation to accept Jesus, that I'm sure I didn't do that invitation well, right? I did my best.
Yep.
I wasn't that, didn't take it seriously, but it's always a little awkward. Like you're like, how do they respond? Do they do it this way? Do they do it this way? Do they say this prayer at this time? Do they need to go back to their leader and have this prayer? Should they come to the front? Do they just stand up? Like I was young, but I just was like, no matter what, I'm going to honor the call, which Meg and her team were saying, make an invitation to accept Jesus tonight. Oh man. And that little girl is one of the ones that stood up, or raised her hand or prayed the prayer. Like I don't even remember the specifics of that moment, but I do remember her, being one of the students who respond. And like, that is one of the craziest humbling things, because in that moment, I always consider those moments like, the four soils.
Yes.
Where like, maybe 75% of these kids that are responding in this moment actually don't live this out.
Yes, right.
Because they get choked out by the cares of this world, or the soil that seed just went on. Like it looks really good, but it's shallow,
right?
Or it's hard, or like it's on the path. It's not even on the ground at all. Right. You thought it was on the ground, but that's just the path, bro. Right. They need some more work, right? Or that seed needs to get blown off the path into the good soil of their heart a different way. But 25% of them, and maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 95%. I don't know the percentages, but there's a heck of a lot of kids where it doesn't take root.
Right.
And that is one where you can say without a shadow of a doubt, she like heard the word of faith. It was grafted into her heart. She gave her life to Jesus, and she's never been the same.
Yeah.
That's super cool. And to know that I was a part of that story, that Jesus through me was a part of that story 10 years ago, and then to get to do ministry alongside of her,
right?
That was freaking wild.
And it was just as cool for her to be able to serve alongside the person that cared enough to show up, to share the gospel at that unique moment in time where God had you together. And I think it was just as important and impactful for her to serve alongside of you as it was for you to serve with her. And I think that's the humbling grace of God. To keep us in relationship, to encourage us forward, and to inspire us on to the next thing that he has for us. So for that, it was awesome.
That was a gift.
Yeah.
The other two interns were great too, not just Sarah. Sam and Matt both did an amazing job as well. I want to share just briefly from mine, and then I want to talk from your perspective about the California trip.
Sure.
And just like what you felt was happening with the youth side. But I had a moment while I was there where I was wrestling through, okay, I wasn't supposed to be here doing this.
Yeah.
Right? Rob was. God is sovereign. He knew Rob wasn't going to be here. Rob, we're sorry. The last you went through. I'm still mad at you. I'm sorry, but I'm still mad at you. But it was like very last minute. Now I'm here.
Yep.
And I was just like, Lord, what do you want to do? Are my eyes not seeing this situation correctly? Like, is there something you want to do that's unique?
Yep.
And what I started to look at was the three interns, with Sam, with Matt, and Sarah. And after I think the second message, I was like, hey, I have an idea. And I think I went to lunch and I was with one of your EDs.
Yes.
Like one of your executive.
He was a board member.
Yeah. What's his name?
Rich.
Rich. He's in California.
Yes.
Amazing dude.
Yep.
Just like shepherd's heart. And I was actually sitting across the table with him at lunch and I started to share. I think I want to have them like speak.
Yeah.
Or at minimum, like share a testimony or something to like empower these interns that they have a role and a responsibility in these kids' lives this week. Cause I'm like, I wasn't even supposed to be here to begin with. So like to do this method or this thing of speaking, like it was supposed to be Rob. Now it's me. Like, who am I supposed to be keeping an eye out for?
Sure.
And he was just like, dude, I think you're on to something like here. Like you're really hearing from the Lord right now as you're articulating this, because that's the heart of the Father. And I was like, yeah, let me meet. I'm going to meet with them. I'm not just going to tell them what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I'm going to meet with the 3 interns. I'm going to express this desire to have them share.
Yep.
And they all were like, yeah, I will do that. Like, I'm intimidated by this. I'm a little bit scared by this, or I don't know how this is going to go. But I think this is a good step for me.
Right.
And so Sarah went, and then Sam went, and then Matt went. And that was like the highlight.
Yeah.
You know, the messages, getting to preach, teach, illustrations, teaching the Bible is all beautiful. Seeing those 3 stand in front of these kids and share their faith.
Yeah.
I was like, I did my job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that was really
Agreed.
beautiful. So what from your end do you like remember about the youth side of the conference and
Sure.
all that kind of stuff?
I think number one, like you just pointed out, the way that you empowered those 3 interns, 3 young adults, to step in and really kind of own their faith and share their faith. I was just so grateful for the way that you shepherded them and didn't just use them as volunteers. Like you taught them, you enabled them, you empowered them to be disciplers, you know, and to really invest in the lives of those kids. So that for me was a huge takeaway. I think from the actual youth perspective of the kids who are in attendance, I loved that you just dove right into scripture. You studied the Bible. You know, Scott and I talked a little bit about like, you know, sometimes when you're engaging youth, our cultural tendency in the church is to really utilize a lot of, you know, stories and narrative and metaphors and other things in order to bring home scripture for kids. And Scott's like, I'm going in with scripture. Like let's see what God does here. And I know that kids were impacted by the raw reality and truth of saying scripture is sufficient. And so let's learn it. And I think they were excited by the collaborative way that you engaged them. I mean, Scott still made it fun. He had them acting things out. And, you know, I think they just enjoyed that. And then taking it a step further, the feedback I heard from parents, one family in particular live in a really rural area where there just aren't other kids, especially the same ages as they have some teenage daughters. And they said by having their kids, their teenagers invited to this Refresh conference is such a blessing to them because it encourages them to return back to the mission field where they feel they've been called to in spite of the hardship of not having peers around to encourage them on a daily basis or to be invested in daily life with them. So to have the gift of this time together with other kids who are living very similar lives, and the encouragement that Scott and those 3 interns were able to bring to them was like food for the soul, right? It was like the nourishment they needed to keep going because God has not only called their parents to the mission field, he's called those kids to that space too. And that's my heart for the Refresh conference, is to remind families like you're in this together as a whole. And I really believe that God will honor your whole calling on your whole family to do all of this ministry together. Yeah. I don't think he calls one person and everyone else just to follow them. You know, I think he has a plan and purpose for each person in that family, whether you're 2, 12, 20, 25 or older. And so I think the way that you invested in them that week just provided fellowship that they needed with peers, but also encouragement, inspiration to continue to go forward, to share the gospel in their context, And the reminder even to those 3 interns to be like, we're not looking for perfection, or we're not looking for a completed story, but we're looking for how God has been at work in your life, and to continually share that. That's testimony. That's what God's doing in our life. And so I'm just so grateful for the way that you equip them to be able to do that quickly, but to also do it well. So there was a lot of takeaways there.
Yeah, I'm like, geez, oh man, Meg is hitting them all. She's a professional podcaster, guys.
I'm just trying to do really well this time, so I never have to do it again.
She's like, this will be my last time on The Time is Right.
First
Thank
and
you.
last.
I think she has an actual outline on her phone with all her bullet points of what she
she
wanted to
just
hit.
had
Like, it's not
50
even anything
50
we got.
bullets.
Right.
No, all that is so solid to hear. It's so funny because I think this whole, just let me teach the Bible. I was like, man, I have 3 days with these kids. What can I give them that's going to matter for the next 362 days?
Yeah.
Because I only get 3 days.
Yep.
And I was like, if I can somehow show them the word of God being like worth spending time in, if that can create like a rhythm and a practice in them, to like a real desire, like the Bible isn't intimidating anymore because it's like a real thing and it teaches us stuff, like if I could just get them to get past that intimidation factor, then maybe that could really change their life, because they're not going to remember anything I say.
Right.
I don't think. They'll remember how they felt. They'll remember maybe one illustration over 5 talks. But if they can remember like, oh, the word does this, and I also just believe the word is true. So I think that whenever the word says like it has the ability to separate bone from flesh, like it actually can do that in a way that our own stories and stuff can't.
Right.
Like all the slides in the world on PowerPoint, I use them. I use the slides, but I want the Bible to be the main thing.
Yep.
And it was kind of like a theory. Like, let me just try this with this group and see what happens. And they were so hungry for God's word.
Yeah.
Like by the end of it, they were just like, yeah, I want to be Noah, like, and like we're doing all this stuff and just walking the text and literally letting the text teach.
Yeah. Right.
Like it was like, I don't have to, sometimes you need to like put it in perspective, like metaphorically to help you understand this point. Here's an idea.
Right.
But for the most part, I just let the Bible like teach itself, and the kids, I think, like ate it up.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that might change how often they get into the Bible the rest of the year ahead.
Yeah.
I think that's a good goal.
Yeah.
And then the secondary part of it with the interns, I mean, that was huge because that became a primary thing the last 3 sessions, with them sharing their testimony. And like you said, I mean, the empowering thing, right? Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, every opportunity, is this for me or is this for somebody else? Yeah. I always ask that question because I don't want to stand in the way of somebody else's blessing. And in a real way, that's what I felt being there. I was like, yeah, these 3 interns work with Meg and InFaith. They might actually have some connectivity to these young people throughout the year that I'm probably not. How do I empower them to be like the superheroes in these kids' eyes, so that if something goes down 6 months from now, they reach out to Sam.
Yes. Right.
Or they reach out to Sarah. Or they reach out to Matt, right? They get help from one of these 3 in a real way. So yeah, that was kind of the goal there.
I think you hit it. And I think it was awesome. I also think too, when we're just talking about kind of the impact that when you said like the kids were hungry for the word, one of the things that I have been so fascinated by stepping into missions in this capacity, in similar way that you and Darlene have committed to missions in the United States, is I have seen time and time again, every missionary I've encountered is certainly not doing it for the life of luxury. You're doing it because you're committed to the call and willing to make some incredible sacrifices. And I have been blessed to see these missionaries make hard sacrifices and invite their kids into a place of discipleship and growth and yearning for God's word and God's goodness in their life, in ways that I think in many other settings that I've been exposed to, even in Christian culture in America, I think sometimes we become dull or blind or unable to see those things. But when I have seen people step into the mission field with a heart to serve Christ and to share his love, there is a raw, authentic, just genuine desire to know Christ more, no matter what. And so that was the connection that I think between the life that you and Darlene have been called to live in connection to the way these missionaries have been called to live, that you were able to connect with them in that way. And that's, I think, why when you're in a space like that and you say, like, here is God's word and that's it, they can hear, see, and hunger for it because God has already kind of stripped away some of those blinders or the things that distract. And I'm just so grateful for your commitment to that calling. And I just think about that for the people listening to this podcast who have supported RIPE or have come alongside of you and Darlene in ministry. I just want to say on your behalf, like, keep giving, keep supporting, keep partnering with Scott and the RIPE team and all of these artists, because God is doing some incredible things because of your partnership, through your partnership. And you, Scott and his team are on the front lines of ministry, and we have the privilege of being a part of that because we get to partner with you. So I'm just so grateful for the things that you and Darlene have committed to in ministry and your entire team, because it's making an impact every day. And I'm blessed enough to be able to see it. And so I just want to speak to it for the people who maybe aren't up close and personal, seeing it on the daily, on the regular. It's happening. God is moving. And this is a worthwhile partnership.
Super humbling. I appreciate that, like, word of affirmation over it. Mm-hmm. Especially considering, like, we are doing something that's so out of the box for so many people.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you even doing?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, like trying to explain this very real spiritual and in ways existential. It's not physical. Mm-hmm. Right. We're not fixing up a person's house.
Right.
We're not building a porch with teenagers.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, it's different.
It is.
So there isn't a before and after picture of a physical piece of property changing.
Yeah.
As much as it's like literally making an impact and an impression on a culture.
Yeah.
Or on a citywide narrative, or on a, like, changing greed to generosity.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, over the course of a generation, or going from, like, I want to be famous to I want to be faithful kind of movement over, like, a generation. Like, how do you quantify that? But I think what has been really, really beautiful is anybody that's seen our community and seen the people in it, which it's not like to our credit, we didn't do this. Mission does it, though.
Yeah.
Right. Scott and Darlene didn't do this. Mm-hmm. Mission does this. When you are on mission for Jesus, you are going to grow in your faith.
Yeah.
Because you understand it's not about you. Yeah. And you understand, like, if you're, like, building your faith, you're going to be a better witness to others as you are engaging people. And so if you're, like, thinking through your life through a missional lens, oh, my songwriting isn't just for me in my room or for Spotify and whoever blatantly streams this, but it's for this room with these people who are far from God. Let me write in such a way to engage them.
Yeah.
That will turn the key in somebody's heart to be faithful.
Absolutely.
And that's what I've seen is, like, RIPE is just like 35, 40 people that have all turned the key to mission. You don't need, permission. Just turn the ignition, right? Like, whatever that spoken word I had back in the day. But that idea of, like, turning the ignition for mission, right?
Yeah.
Just do that and trust that God's going to develop the teachers. Like, when you're a kid in third grade and you teach a first grader math, you learn math better as the third grader teaching it. Right. We want kids to learn how to teach others because they're going to learn it better. It's the same thing with the gospel.
Yeah.
When you're teaching it to others, when you're giving it to other people, when you're articulating your faith in your life and the way that you live and the way that you speak and in your creativity, you are getting that thing so deeply rooted into your heart,
Right.
that like you're probably not going to have a deconstruction moment in 5 years,
Yeah.
because you're walking out your faith daily.
Right.
There's no turning around from this thing, because you're committed to it, because it's who you really are.
Right.
And that's what we have. So yeah, these teenagers are a representation of that. Mm-hmm. And, I think in general, I'm just about this conversation a lot. Yeah. I could probably go on for 2 days. Jarrett's looking at me like we probably need to wrap up soon, but
Yeah, probably.
Fair enough.
Get people on mission.
Yeah.
They will grow in their faith, like do the work, because people will be impacted by it. And shout out to these teenagers for being amazing. Meg, just like in closing up this conversation, California was great. Thank you for inviting me. Rob, I'm still mad at you. But I just the biggest picture of this is just our relationship, our friendship.
Yeah.
It's been 13 years.
Yeah. Right.
Right? Going on 14 years. We've known each other. We've gotten to do a whole lot of stuff together. There's a whole spider web of stories here, in terms of things that Ripe now gets to do because of just our friendship.
Right.
And so I just want to say thank you for all the words you've said on this podcast about us, and you should support them. Amen. Praise God. But thank you for, you could call other people, and you've made a choice to, call Ripe.
Sure.
And stay in connection with us and call us again and again. You could easily be like, that was great. We'll call them in 3 years. Yep. For us, it's like every time you need a worship team, you call us, right? Every time you need an artist, you call us. That just is so helpful for us trying to build something. We need consistent people that want us to do everything for them that we can. So I just want to affirm that in you. You have, Ripe exists in ways because of you that it wouldn't if you weren't in our lives. So
Praise
thank
God.
you for that. Genuinely. So
You're welcome.
we really appreciate you.
Well, and it's mutual. I'm so grateful for you and your team, the ways you guys show up time and time again, faithfully, even for the smallest opportunities. You have taught me that one person is worth it. And you were willing to show up when there wasn't big crowds. You're willing to show up when there's only 20 kids. And your commitment to the gospel has never wavered in light of those things. So thank you guys for partnering with me and my community and InFaith in ministry. And I'm excited to see what God continues to do.
Amen. Shout out to InFaith. Please look them up if you are here on the Ripe side and you don't know what InFaith is. Please look them up. And if you have a missionary calling on your life and you're wrestling through that whole thing, really look up InFaith. Yeah. Look up ACT International as well, but talk to Meg, talk to Mike. That is what they do is they help people who are called to ministry develop a way to be able to step into that.
Yes.
And begin ministries, from the ground up and all that kind of stuff. So that's their passion is mobilizing people who feel called to the ministry in maybe an unconventional kind of way.
Absolutely.
So please look them up. And, if you're in Philadelphia, look us up. If you are throwing an event, you need artists, look us up, all the things. We do a whole lot of stuff. Go to our website, ripecreatives.com. We do just want to say thank you to everybody who partners with us already. Without your support, this podcast certainly doesn't happen, but all of the events that we do don't take place without your generosity. So thank you for partnering with us. If you're here and you don't, jump on our website. Please consider, becoming a monthly partner, support what we do. Every dollar goes a long way for us to be able to continue to do ministry through the arts in this city that ultimately does in ways impact around the world, So we appreciate y'all. Thank you for tuning in. Jarrett, as always, thank you for producing, editing. Thanks for being on the episode, cracking some jokes, telling us we need to wrap it up. We appreciate you. Until next time, y'all, stay right.
Produce section. Hey, tell us what you need. We got love, peace, kindness in abundance, and it's all free. Hey, yo, at times we out of patience, but I'm grateful that he gracious. Yo, we got a shipment coming through this week. Gossiping brothers playing telephone. They ain't trying to man up, right? They pay the